Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of Meet La Prensa. Viewer, if you like what you see here, if you're finding value, please be sure to hit like and subscribe right here below. Today's guest is actually a friend of mine from my days out in the San Francisco Bay Area. Clarissa Gonzalez is a reporter out there, a journalist who is, when I met her, she was a student at San Francisco State University, a real go-getter, and it's just an honor to have her on Meet La Prensa. Clarissa, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Pablo, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So catch us up on some of the things that you've been working on. What's new in the Bay?
Um, well, everything's open. San Francisco has been really at the forefront of just kind of lifting, not so much lifting COVID restrictions, but kind of being ahead of the rest of the nation, being a model as to what cities should be doing to protect their citizens. So fortunately enough, San Francisco is at this point where we have about 80% of our residents, at least with one shot in the arm. So we're really moving up and getting out there. For news, what that means is people are coming back into the newsroom. It was really tough last year having to go to remote. When I was working at one of our local stations, it was just kind of, we came in one day and we had to tell our anchors, we need to make an at-home setup. So kind of reflecting from where we've been in news and kind of looking at what's happening now and what's coming ahead, a lot has changed. Like I said, people are coming back into the newsroom. Some reporters are trying to, look ahead to different stories that are not so much about COVID, and we're going back into the community and what events are happening, what kind of groups are forming, what kind of organizations are hosting, events to bring back life to San Francisco. So a lot of things have changed out here in news, but it's been for the better. It's been a lot more lively, and you just see in the newsroom that people are excited to get back out there and to really present what's happening in the community.
So, as the world opens back up, as San Francisco opens back up, what are some stories or some topics that you're interested in covering now that perhaps you couldn't, or that would have been it would have been impossible to cover while the COVID restrictions were still in place?
Yeah, it was tough because for a long time, all of our morning meetings, the pitches were just COVID this, COVID that, hospitals, vaccinations, a bunch of different things. So a couple things that I'm really looking ahead to are just kind of like community events. Particularly, I'm a big fan of like kind of dancing and stuff. And so it's been nice to see that some dance classes, some like dance venues are hosting outdoor classes. They're inviting people to come in and dance for salsa night or for Latino night or anything that's happening. And I think really just to generalize, what I'm excited for is the community events. What are people excited about? What are people trying to publicize? It's just a bunch of different organizations coming out and having fun. It's the summer, and it really feels like that in San Francisco right now, which is really awesome when you work in news, and it's just been so hard these past couple months.
Have you had the opportunity to go out dancing yet since the pandemic's been over?
Not really. We went out to this venue with my friends, and even though it wasn't really a dancing place, we kind of made it a dancing place.
Nice.
So that was fun.
That's awesome. So I remember we met, or when we first met, it was at a National Association of Hispanic Journalists sort of event or kind of trip to a newsroom. And I'm wondering, like, one of the big topics that I think that National Association of Hispanic Journalists really focuses on are challenges that Latinx news workers have in the business. And you specifically as a Latina, I think it's important. And we've had other Latinas, obviously, who are journalists on Meet La Prensa in the past. Latinas, as our viewers know, are on average paid considerably less than white men in the American economy. There are a lot of challenges facing Latinas as a result of that very unjust dynamic. But specifically in the news business, what are some challenges that you've had to confront, perhaps as a Latina, or have there been any challenges that you've had to confront as a Latina in the news business?
I've been fortunate enough to not have any kind of bold bad interactions in terms of being Latina in the industry. It was just I started in news kind of early. I got in around my junior year, my undergrad. And walking into the newsroom, you hear a lot about how it's not very diverse, but you don't really see it until you're in there. So I had a tough time kind of learning to, you try to find mi gente and like what kind of community you fit in. And I had a little bit of a struggle at my first news job just because I felt like not only was I the younger one, I felt a lot like the minorities. So naturally, I kind of gravitated to other Latinas and to other people that I felt, again, it was just really finding my place in the newsroom that was kind of tough. Just because I wasn't just coming in as a Latina, I was coming in as an undergraduate student. A lot of people, I just felt like there was a much higher standard that I had to meet as opposed to being able to put in what I had to offer. I always had to kind of go one step ahead because you come to learn in this industry that it's very competitive. And if you're a minority, it is systemically a lot harder. So no outright, horrible interactions that I've had or anything. It was just, again, finding my place. That was a little tough.
Well, kudos to you for getting started early in the news business as an undergraduate. That's amazing. I think that that's I think increasingly rare in the news business that people find an opportunity, forge an opportunity while they're still studying. So that's awesome. And also props to you for finding a pueblo inside of the newsroom, like the Latinos in there like you who can offer support. Is there any other guidance that you might offer to Latinas who are just getting started or looking to get started in the news business from your experience so far as a worker in the news business?
The advice that I would give is that it's hard, but you have to get through it. You know, I think that makes us people so resilient is that just our capability to kind of put ourselves in these situations that may be a little scary, that may be, uncharted territory, but it's not like you have all these odds against you trying to defeat you. It's that you are the one kind of in charge of your own destiny and you got to put in the work and it's going to be twice as hard. But once you do it for yourself. I think recently I was reading this article that AP had released that said that Latinas were the demographic that were most kind of not most impacted by COVID, but very heavily impacted because most Latinas are single moms who had to drop out of work or had to leave their jobs and come home and take care of their kids. And I think that's just us as a demographic. There's a lot of kind of cultural responsibilities that Latinas carry that make it tough to be in news. Like personally, I have a huge family. I don't live close to them. I moved up to San Francisco to come to school. But one of the struggles that I'm having is I miss home. But what does that mean if I'm trying to be my own person and trying to really make myself in news? It's just sacrifices are going to come, and at the end of the day, you just got to get through them. You really just got to put one foot in front of the other. And for me, what gives me a lot of hope is that I know I have a lot of people looking up to me, and so when things get tough, I know that I'm not doing them for myself. That I represent a much larger demographic of women who go through the exact same things that I'm going through, and it just makes us so much stronger if I'm one who's able to continue past that.
I love that. So let's say hypothetically, in an imaginary world, you get a call, like you get off this interview and you get a call, and it's the White House press office, and they're like, "Look, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are going to be in San Francisco tomorrow. We want you sitting up front at that press conference. Ask whatever question you want. What's your
Oh
question?"
gosh, what would I ask? Um, Yeah, Jesus. So I guess if I was put in a position like this, um, things that are kind of on the forefront of my mind are Latinos. Particularly in San Francisco, it's very diverse here. We have a lot of, you know, just it's kind of a great melting pot of different people and different ideas that all assimilate really well. And I understand that outside of this little bubble that we live in, it's not the same. So particularly for Kamala, I would ask, the infamous "Do not come" quote, is this something that she has had on her mind since trying to win voters kind of support? The question that I would really ask her would just kind of be like, what is your approach to trying to get the Latino community to support you more when you're outwardly going against things that you were kind of presenting before you or while you were running in the election? What does that mean for Latinos? Like what is she hoping to receive from this when we're getting all these other things like that just kind of conflict from what she was kind of preaching, I guess, in the election.
Kamala Harris is basically an emissary of the president, and down in let's see, I guess that was something that she said in Guatemala. I think that no, and I don't know that anybody actually ever asked the president. I think they asked Jen Psaki in one of the briefings, like, what is this "don't come here"? What does that mean? Because like me as a Chilean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying Chileans shouldn't come here? Are you saying Mexicans shouldn't come here? So is it just Guatemala? Like, what's the issue? And I know that like the way that they spun it was sort of like, well, what we mean is don't come here because we're afraid that you're going to be hurt on the journey. Like, but I don't buy that. You know what I mean? Like, no other group since like the Chinese were told not to come here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's been a long time. And as an Asian American, I mean, Kamala Harris is an educated woman, an educated person from a immigrant background. I mean, she should know that like "don't come here" has been something that like white Americans have been telling Americans of color for centuries, for decades and decades, even centuries. So I think it was I agree with you. I think it was a real shame that
Yeah.
that she said those things. And I do wonder like what on earth was she thinking? There's a million things she could have said from that podium. "Don't come here." Are you kidding me? Like I don't know if she's trying to run for office in like in Texas or something like that, but that's not or in like Missouri, but like that just
Yeah.
struck me as odd.
Well, yeah, like you said, she's a product of immigrants. That was her whole platform when she was running for election. It's that, I am one of you. I am like you. So for her to come out and say, "Do not come here," it's like you were saying, what does that mean? does that mean people shouldn't try to come out and live a better life? Is it really about, you know, oh, we don't want you to get hurt. It's a very tumultuous journey. It's very dangerous. Coyotes, like all the words she was saying were kind of playing. It seemed more like kind of a game, you know, with the way that the rhetoric is going on from the past administration and trying to transfer it
Right.
over to what's happening now. Are you trying to appeal to like not Republican voters, but people against immigration laws? Is this really how you feel? Is this platform for you? Like, what did it mean? You know?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that people should be asking President Biden and Kamala Harris that question, because they're certainly going to get asked a lot in the presidential election 3 years from now. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, and again, I just couldn't, those were Donald Trump's words coming out of Kamala Harris's mouth, you know, and it was just, to me, it was really weird. I mean, some of these immigration policies that were really evil that were designed by Stephen Miller and the Trump administration, there is a justification for why you can't just like immediately stop them and turn them around, because they really did leave a mess that you kind of have to clean up before you can actually like completely, you know, kind of turn the ship on this on the xenophobia that, you know, immigrant communities have been experiencing at the hands of our own government. Like, taxpayers are paying for this awful stuff. But yeah, I thought that the "don't come here" thing was totally toned. I don't know who the audience for that was, but I mean, after the Donald Trump presidency, I feel like there's less and less of a reason for Latin Americans to take us seriously, and that was just another one where it's just like, yeah, okay, don't come here, right, buddy? You know, so.
And I remember that press conference because like it sounded like she was definitely sugarcoating up to the point that led to the "do not come." But the second that she said that, it kind of froze time. And I
Yeah.
remember everyone in the newsroom was like, okay, well, this needs to be the graphic. Quote, Kamala Harris, "do not come." And it was just such a moment, like it was such a stone cold moment in time that I feel like really changed the perspective of her to a lot of voters, because who else is going to be fighting for us if it's not the product of immigrants? Like, if anyone, you were the one to make it an office to represent us. And to kind of backtrack and you know, say all these other things that weren't on your platform when you were running for election, it just kind of makes you wonder. And it's understandable why people start to lose a lot of trust in politicians when it's time to come up to the plate and they just don't perform.
Right. Right. They strike out swinging. So.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah. Well,
mhm.
Clarissa Gonzalez, thank you so much for joining Meet La Prensa. Viewer, you can find Clarissa's Twitter handle right here in the description of this video. Please hit like and subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on. That's a wrap.
Thank you for having me.